They didn't ask you to join a cult. They didn't ask you to steal a car. They only asked for 2 minutes of your time. So why does that tiny request so often lead to complete compliance? Well, that's the core paradox of the foot-in-the-door technique, a persuasion strategy so subtle it actually weaponizes your own desire to be a good, consistent person against you. You know, it always starts with an ask, so small it almost feels rude to say no. It's simple, trivial even. Seems totally harmless, right? Just a little blip in your day you barely even think about. But that single, tiny moment, that's a carefully laid tripwire. Because that moment is specifically designed to end with a commitment you never saw coming. It's the very first domino in a long chain reaction, and it's all engineered to walk you from a small, agreeable nod to a final decision that might go against your better judgment, your values, maybe even your own self-interest. See, this isn't about brute force or obvious pressure. It's about something far more insidious. It's a quiet manipulation of your own internal psychology. It works by taking your best qualities, your helpfulness, your consistency, your desire to just be a reasonable person, and turning them into levers of influence. So, how does this happen? And more importantly, how do you see it coming? All right, so here's how we're gonna break it all down. First, we'll unpack that tiny request paradox. Then we'll define the tactic and see where it's used. We'll dissect its two-step mechanism, expose the deep human need for consistency that it exploits, and then we'll get to the good stuff, your three-step defense and how you can break the chain of compliance for good. Okay, first things first, let's put a name to the thing at the heart of this paradox. What exactly is the foot-in-the-door technique? The name might sound a little old-fashioned, but I promise you, its application is as modern as it gets. It all boils down to this. Get someone to agree to a small, easy initial request, and they become way more likely to agree to a second, much larger request later on. The name comes from those classic door-to-door salesmen. They knew their first job wasn't to sell the vacuum cleaner. It was just to stop the door from closing. If they could literally get their foot in the door, just create that tiny opening, their chances of making the real sale went through the roof. And trust me, this is happening all around you every single day. In retail, it's a salesperson asking, "Can I help you find your size?" A tiny yes. Before you know it, they're guiding you to a much more expensive part of the store. In politics, it's asking you to put a little sign on your lawn before they come back a week later asking for a big donation. And it gets darker. This exact same principle is used by fundraisers in cult recruitment and in abusive systems, where tiny requests for your time slowly morph into huge demands for your money, your loyalty, your entire life. That harmless first step, it's always the gate win. So you might be wondering, how does a simple sales trick become such a powerful psychological tool? Well, the answer is in its methodical, two-step mechanism. It's a process that's engineered to slip right past your rational defenses. The pattern itself is deceptively simple. It's a 1-2 punch. Step 1 is the initial commit. This is that tiny request, right? The ask that's so low effort, it feels kind of weird to say no. Can you sign this? Just one survey question? But here's the thing, that's just the setup. It's immediately followed by step 2, the escalation. This is the real goal, the bigger ask that you probably would have said no to from the start. The momentum from that first yes is designed to carry you straight into the second. Now here's the real trick. The manipulation isn't happening out there, it's happening inside your own head. The moment you agree to that small action, you subconsciously update your self-perception. You sign a petition, and your brain doesn't just register the action, it tells itself a story. I am a helpful, civically engaged person. You answer a quick survey, and you subtly label yourself as agreeable. This little internal shift, this relabeling of who you think you are, is the entire point of step 1. And boom, that's when the trap springs. When the second, bigger request comes along, you're not just looking at the request anymore. Now you're facing a conflict with this new self-image you just created. Saying no now would feel weird. It creates that cringy, uncomfortable feeling you get when your actions don't line up with your beliefs. Psychologists call it cognitive dissonance. Basically, you'd feel like a hypocrite. And to get rid of that icky feeling, you comply, just to stay consistent with the helpful person you decided you were 2 minutes ago. So let's dig a little deeper into the psychology here, because this is the core of the exploit. The foot-in-the-door technique is so powerful because it doesn't really use outside pressure. It just turns your own psychological wiring against you, specifically that deep, powerful drive we all have to be consistent. The main weapon at play here is what's known as the commitment and consistency principle. We are literally hardwired to want to be consistent. Society thinks it's a good thing, right? It shows integrity, stability. We don't trust people who are all over the place. So once we make a choice, any choice, we feel this huge internal pressure to behave in a way that lines up with it. That first tiny yes is the commitment, and it's engineered to trigger this powerful psychological pressure, making you want to align all your future actions with it. And working right alongside that is a second mechanism, self-perception theory. This one's a little bit of a mind bender. We usually think our beliefs drive our actions, but this theory says that a lot of the time, it's the other way around. We see ourselves do something, and then we decide what we must believe based on that action. So when you agree to that small request, you observe yourself being compliant, and your brain goes, I must be the kind of person who supports this cause. You are literally redefining who you are based on one tiny little action. So when you put these two principles together, what you get is a slow, methodical lowering of your cognitive guard. It's like walking down a path. Each step seems logical and consistent with the last one, so you don't even notice that the path is leading you somewhere you never intended to go. This is how smart, ordinary people end up complying with requests they would have flat out rejected at the start. The path was paved, one tiny yes at a time. Okay, so we've seen how the trap works. Now for the most important part. How do you defend against it? How do you recognize the pattern and shut the door before they even get a foot in? The key isn't to become a cynical person. It's just about learning to protect your initial boundary. So here's a simple 3-step defense. Step 1, cognitive reframing. When you get a small request, consciously separate the action from your identity. Tell yourself, signing this is a one-time thing. It doesn't make me a lifelong supporter. That stops the self-perception shift before it starts. Step 2, assert your boundaries. Get comfortable saying no to small things you're not really into. A polite no thank you is all you need. That prevents the first commitment from ever happening. And step 3, delay the decision. If you do say yes to a small request and a bigger one follows, just hit the pause button. Say, let me think about it. That little time gap breaks the psychological momentum and lets you evaluate the second request on its own terms. And if you take away just one thing from all of this, let it be this. Your initial yes does not create a future obligation. You are allowed to be helpful 1 minute and decline the next. You're allowed to change your mind. Granting a small favor is not a binding contract for larger ones. Your power is in realizing that every decision is independent. In the end, understanding this technique isn't just some interesting psychological trivia. It's about reclaiming your own autonomy, your fundamental power to say no in a world that is constantly asking for a yes. So let's wrap this up. First, remember that the tiny request is never random. It's a strategic, deliberate move. It's an anchor designed not to get something from you, but to change something in you, creating the psychological pressure that's needed for that final, complete compliance. Next, remember how the pattern works. The initial small yes forces that critical shift in your self-perception. It gets you to label yourself as a supporter or a helper. Then, that new identity is immediately used to exploit our deep human need for consistency. But here's the good news. Awareness breaks the loop. The second you recognize the pattern, the technique loses all its power. By protecting that initial boundary, by refusing to let a past yes dictate a future choice, you reclaim your power of refusal. You break the chain before the second link is even forged. Compliance is a slope, built one small step at a time. And the most important step you take is always the first one. So the question to ask yourself is this: who and what are you giving your first yes to?